Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Modern Business Operations. Today, I have the pleasure to host Cherie. Cherie is the Senior Director of Procurement at Broadridge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Well, I'm excited to learn about your, you know, adventure through your career that lends you in procurement, and maybe we start from there. Maybe you can share a little bit about your background and how you got to this role.
Sure. I always tell this story. When I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't have money for graduate school, at least not right away. So I took one of those tests where you see like where your skills and abilities lie. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take this test in the guidance counselor's office, and then I'm going to know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I scored evenly in everything. And it was the worst day of my life. And but it turns out after majoring in art and doing all sorts of things that really procurement is like the ideal spot for somebody who scores evenly in everything. You get the ability to be creative, get to work with people, get to do research, get to write, you get to make presentations and build compelling business cases. You get to do a deep dive into the numbers. So for me, I like something to be different every day. I like to be very tied into the business, and I really have kind of a broad skill set. So for me, that's really how I landed into procurement. I started off as an office manager, and then I became an IT buyer, and after that, it just kind of accelerated. I worked at Ernst and Young for a while, and then I got my CPM, and then I moved into a more of a manufacturing kind of a role at Mars, and then I continued in that sort of a facilities manufacturing type role at Broadridge. So um, for me, it just was sort of a natural fit. It wasn't something that I was expecting. I believe when I went to school, they didn't have a major in supply chain, so except in a very few colleges in the country. So it's something I fell into, but it's also something that I love.
Nice. No, this is it's always interesting how people, get to where they are. Well, I think you also mentioned quite different industries and different altitudes. So,
Hmm.
what this is interesting, I think, to me personally, but I think also to the listeners, that I've kind of had the chance to speak to more and more folks from procurement, and I think big part of it is there's a lot of innovation and a lot of progress in this space, and so it's very timely area. When we talk about modern business operations, kind of like how you modernize and make progress there. How would you like? How do you see this from your eyes, right? In that last decade and the different industries, how do you see that
Well,
change?
So for me, I think one of the biggest changes I have worked in a lot of industries. I've worked in telecom, in finance, in manufacturing, and I think one of the things, I mean, there's only two ways for a business to change their financial profile. One is to make more money, the other is to save more money. And you need both pieces of it, right? And I think that over the time that I've been in procurement, which is about, I don't know, 27 years now, hard to believe. What I've seen is things have gone from being very tactical to being strategic. That's the answer that I would have given maybe before COVID. But I think that what COVID taught us is that you have to build strategies, but they have to be flexible. You can't assume that the world is going to stay the same and that your long term 5 year plan, everything's going to just keep going in the direction that it's going. You can't just follow the same curve that's been going right along. I think technology, to your point, is moving along a lot, moving on a lot faster. And we have a lot of unexpected disruptions. But for me, the real key between sort of developing these strategies in a vacuum and then understanding, what can happen around the world is the interconnectivity of those strategies. So for example, you might be doing a strategy about lab testing, right? You test your finished goods, your products, your food, whatever it is before it goes out. But that also links to your logistics strategy. How quickly can they return those results so that you can get your product out the door faster? If there's a logistics issue, if there aren't enough drivers on the road, it impacts your lab testing. And those two things, you may not be thinking about them at the same time. They may be run by totally different parts of the business. And I really think that procurement is the only one who has that view, that top down view, who can really see how all of these categories connect.
This is kind of what brought me in a way to learn more and be more interested in this space. I've for many years focused almost primarily on operations. And what's interesting to me is that there's a lot of similarities in some of that concept where you kind of both on from what you just mentioned, where you kind of sit in a pivotal point in which a lot of those different departments, different dependencies come together, and you have visibility that some people might not. But then
Hmm.
also the sort of maturity curve in where you move from, as a profession, I mean, move from, more tactical to more strategic, right? There's always a mix, but where you're sort of like your self-definition first, and then the time you spend is moving from more tactical to more strategic. And it's always followed by technology as well, and that's kind of what I found interesting, is when every time a sub market like this becomes mature enough, then all of a sudden technology pops like like flowers after a rainy day. The question I have for you, though, as a follow-up, is that usually when you do think about departments that stay strategic
Hmm.
are the ones that can impact the bottom line. And you mentioned it, you can either save money or you can make money.
Hmm.
How do you think about that in your current role, or just in general, when you think about structures for procurement teams, and how you kind of get involved to make that impact?
I mean, I think that more and more, I think businesses realize how critical supply chain is to their ability to deliver, whether it's speed or quality or price, right? So everybody's kind of aware of that. But I think it can be the difference between making a sale and breaking a sale. I'll tell you an example from where I work currently. We provide a lot of printed materials to our customers. Um, you know, if we're outbid, for example, in certain areas, because either we didn't do the bid properly or we don't have the right supply base or we don't have the right leverage, we're going to be outbid. And that's a sale that's lost. So that's something where procurement needs a seat at the table to understand what the forecasts are going to look like, what we're bidding on, and then get in touch with sales too about what we've lost and why. Was our proposal not sharp enough, or were there certain key pieces and key components, raw materials, services, whatever the case may be, that just aren't priced right. And maybe that's because we're not buying it right. When I worked at Mars, Frank Mars, who's a member of the Mars family, used to say all the time, make it well, or buy it well, sell it, buy it well, make it well, sell it well. That was his like three guiding principles, right? You have to buy the right things at the right price. You have to have the right production, and then you have to be able to sell that product. And it's much easier to sell a product that's made well and bought well because the price is going to be right and the quality is going to be right. So it's such a direct link, and I think it's what keeps procurement from being the back office function that it used to be.
I love this one. This is actually super simple and practical concept,
Hmm.
but I think it actually goes even beyond procurement. In many ways, the essence of that consequence and the dependency of those different levels, right? It's kind of like obvious in, when you zoom out, but so many times, people are kind of stuck in. So maybe that's kind of sort of the next aspect of it. So when you think about previous lives, previous companies, or this company, or in general, like, have you had that situation where you felt the team is pretty tactical and we need to elevate ourselves or the team to be more strategic?
I mean, I think that's been the case most places that I've worked. I think when I joined Mars in 2011, for example, it was very tactical. We had a lot of buyers, and we had buyers at each factory, for example, right? They were buying for their factory and only for their factory. So we didn't even have national contracts, and we didn't have consistency from, I would say that the direct materials, like the raw ingredients and packaging, was bought in a more holistic way. But when you think about indirect, which I know, is a very important part of procurement that's often overlooked, they were buying the same exact services or probably very different services for each factory over and over. They had zero leverage. This is a $36 billion company who was buying things $50,000 at a time, right? And how do you have any consistency in the food production world? Janitorial is critical. Pest control is critical. Things have to be, chemically clean, physically clean. They have to be clean in appearance. And if you have 25 different companies working at 25 different factories, how are you going to get that same level of consistency? You're just not. And you're not going to get any kind of value either out of it from a price standpoint. Starting there, even, and then broadening things out between business segments, maybe broadening things out globally. So yeah, most places, I think a lot of procurement people will relate. They go to work at a very big company and they think, oh, at this job, everything's going to be modernized, everything's going to be centralized, everything's going to be great. But it rarely is. Companies grow through acquisition. They bring on a company that's either more advanced, less advanced on all different systems and have all different processes, different travel policy, different credit card policy, different T&E policy. And that integration often doesn't happen because nobody hears about this merger until it's already done, because it's very secret, and then it doesn't give people any time to play catch up to get these systems and processes all aligned. So I see it all over the place. If you feel like your your company is very decentralized, you're definitely not alone. Some of the biggest companies in the world are terribly decentralized.
How do you go about it then? So like what is some of the moves, right? So like even when you think about something actionable like you had with, you know, too many suppliers, you need to kind of, trying to get something that is national wide and you can get leverage. How do you go about it internally? Like when a lot of times, through those conversations become very clear that, change and culture and sometimes even a DNA of a company plays a role in the ability of it to go from
Mhm.
strategic to sorry, from tactical to strategic.
Yeah, it is difficult. So there's two things that need to happen. First of all, you have to have the facts on your side. You have to know what's going on. And getting that information is very challenging. I will say that Broadridge strategic sourcing is very new to Broadridge. They've only been doing it maybe a year and a half, 2 years. But they did things in the correct order. First, they hired a company to help them with all of their data, collecting all of the data into a big data lake and organizing it, and then reviewing it and making sure that it's correct, so that when we go to the stakeholders and we say, listen, we spend, I don't know, $10 million a year on janitorial. Your site spends $50,000. You have to think about what's best for the company. If they say, what? We spend $1 million on janitorial. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not going to get your foot in the door at all. You have to be able to create that business case about why change is good. You have to get the right people on your side, maybe the quality team, not just let's say, the plant manager whose best friend has been mopping the floor in there for 20 years, or maybe they're insourcing it, right? If your best employee is cleaning the toilet, promote him. If he's only there because that's all he can do, replace him. That's sort of my feeling. So you got to get the facts on your side, and that's often hard to do but very critical. And then the other part is you have to have a voice at the top, because you have to have that connection point. Maybe it's the CPO is talking to the vice president of operations. You have to have a connection somewhere higher up, because everyone's got their own little kingdom, whether it's the VP of a segment, the plant manager, the office manager sometimes has a lot of control in various offices, the president of a segment. You have to have somewhere to go. You have to know which fights to fight. You have to know which ones to back away from. And you have to build credibility by investing time into projects that these leaders care about. But then that will give you some kind of sweat equity to be able to say, okay, we know what you're talking about. We can see that you've done it. We're willing to listen to you on this other thing that maybe a few people are a little uncomfortable with. And you have to be willing to take responsibility.
I love it. This is very, very repeatable, I feel. And
Hmm.
it's probably, probably a lot of people are nodding their heads as they listen to it.
I'm sure it's true.
um, we talked about. I think one thing that I can connect here, if we kind of go back, um, in your first, few couple minutes, you really described well the, I think what COVID, you know, uh, reaction. I would
Mm-hmm.
say 'cause it's not obviously COVID itself that did that, but the changes that happened to the market and how we all had to react, what it did for a lot of things. And I think going back to this last point, even getting the top uh, people in the company sponsoring some of those things, I'm sure is getting easier or got at least slightly easier, because you have some of those economic, like macroeconomic examples and facts
Mm-hmm.
to add to your you know tactical micro facts, to your point, and you come to it together, and you're like, this is the cause and effect, and you can get some of that, some with you. But the other thing that I think the COVID years did, and just in general the economic turmoil, is really open opportunity for technology to be injected everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said in the beginning, I do definitely see that in the procurement space more than in the past. It's probably a wave thing, but that's definitely a wave right now. I guess my kind of follow-up question on that is, when do you bring technology into the mix? Because sometimes people start from technology and then they lose the they don't have the right plan in mind. Sometimes, like you said, if you don't have the data, if you didn't spend the energy and resources, and that resources sometimes will be technology to collect the data and to bring it together, then you're also fighting a losing battle. So like how do you think about that? When do you bring technology in? How do you, when you design, when you think about being more strategic, how does that come to play?
Yeah, so technology isn't going to solve your problems. You have to understand what your problems are before you invest in technology. I interviewed at a company once that said, "Oh, we don't know what our spend is. Everybody buys whatever they want. Everybody signs contracts, but don't worry because we're getting a new system very soon." Like that is not a system that helps you run RFPs and stores your documentation is not going to help anybody in this situation. You first need to figure out what you want. You can't start building a house before you've designed it. So you have to really understand kind of first of all, what you're dealing with, what you're going to need to import from. Does the data exist? Does it not exist? Are we starting from scratch? What do you want your taxonomy to look like? What kind of controls do you want? Is this a situation where everybody just buys whatever they want, or what are we using it for? Are we using it to help control spend? Are we using it to help track spend? Do we, what kind of hierarchies do we want? You really need to have you need to build that structure first, and then you will know what the right technologies are for
And
you.
who are the people, right? Like, what is the culture? What is who are the different stakeholders? What do they care about?
That's right. Are they going to use it? Because the best technology in the world is garbage if people don't use it, right? You could have all the catalogs, you could have great systems, but if people are working around it, then it doesn't work. And it has to be, for me, I think when I think about compliance, I want technology that's going to drive compliance, not technology that's going to drive people away. So people will do what's easiest. Everybody's got a job to do, and when we're talking about procurement, right, you need something. You need a laptop for your new hire. You're going to do whatever is the easiest thing for you to do. If you live next door to a Best Buy and you can run next door to the Best Buy and get it, expense it, maybe that's going to be the easiest thing for you to do. Is you can click one button and it tells you the 3 laptops that are available at Broadridge, and you can choose one, and that's going to be the easiest thing. It's going to be delivered to the guy's house. Everything's going to get done. Then that's what you're going to do. You're not going to do something that's going to require you to look it up in the catalog, then create a purchase order, then do this, then get it signed, then find your boss, then find your boss's boss. Everything has to happen in an easy way if people are going to be compliant. Some companies have a very strong compliance culture. I worked at EY for about 4 years. There, they send out a survey, everybody fills it out, 99%, because it's a compliance culture. They tell you everybody gets this and that office chair. Nobody says, "Oh, but my back," or "I need something special because I'm a big shot," or "I have this or that kind of job." You just sit in the chair and that's it, because that's how it works. At a lot of other companies, though, people are really free to operate. People, they just want you to get the work done, and however you can do it is great. So if you want people to be compliant in a non-compliance culture, you have to make it the easiest possible way to get things done, and you have to block other avenues. You have to think about, is this really going to solve the problem that I have? And to do that, you have to be very honest with yourself about what the problems are. An idea that's developed in an ivory tower that people aren't, you have to road test it with real users.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. Uh it's it's different expectations.
Hmm.
It's not um I sometimes call it the DMV effect. It's like 20 years ago, or so. And like you said, the compliance, some companies are still today with the compliance culture, but 20 years ago big enterprises were mostly compliance culture. Just
Hmm.
come in, you put the hours and you go out. And similar to the DMV, the reason I call it the DMV is because if the DMV tells you to fill a form in a specific ink color, you
Hmm.
gotta fill the form that way, or you're not gonna get a driver license. And if you don't have a driver license, you can literally go to jail, right? And
Hmm.
so, but that's just not how the modern world operates anymore. And in most cases, even in very big companies with a lot of red tape, still there's multiple avenues that people can take. And to your point, they'll take the shortest, easiest one. And no one is going to get fired for that if they're doing their main job
That's
correctly.
right. That's 100% right. You're not going to fire somebody because they bought their pen at Target instead of through Staples catalog, because they're bringing in $10 million in sales. 100%. But then, so that's the front end. Is it's got to be easy, pleasant, even for people who use it very rarely. It has to be intuitive, and then on the back end, it has to give you the data that you want. That's going to help you drive decisions. People, I think, were sort of thinking like many years ago, like they had an idea in their head of what would be the best way to do things. Now you can see, oh, what are people actually buying? How are they buying it? How often are they buying it? How do they feel about it? You can get instant feedback, and this way you can have the data, and then you can make those really really good decisions, or you can use AI to help you analyze that data and make good decisions. So there's a lot that technology has to offer. It becomes more and more intuitive. People live with technology all day every day, so you just have to make it as easy as any technology that they would want to use, like ordering off of Amazon, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. This is very, very, I think, practical, and gets you. I think a lot of people will appreciate that. Maybe as sort of going back to your personal, where we started
Hmm.
career. What would be maybe the best advice you've received in your career that worth paying forward?
So maybe I'll start with the worst career advice that I've gotten. I think
That
some people
works.
probably would turn that question on its head. So I worked in a very professional environment where I was told that I would be more promotable if I wore heels and makeup, and by a woman at work. And that, I think, was terrible advice, because I think at the end of the day, leadership has to be authentic. You can feel it. It takes so much energy to be a leader, and if you burn up that energy by pretending to be something you're not, you're never going to bring your whole self to work. And I think now that inclusivity is becoming, a very hot topic, I think it's really going to bring out the best in people. So to me, being an inclusive and authentic leader is really the best thing that you can be. I think one of the other things that I've learned over time is that your work's not going to speak for itself. It's not enough to just do good work. You also have to tell people what your aspirations are. And this is I would say, for women in particular. I think for many years, I worked with, I put my head down and I did great work, but I never told anybody what I want to do next. I never, I thought it was maybe showing off, or, being presumptuous, but you have to tell people what you want. I think the best thing that a company can do is develop their people. But if you're in if you're not in a culture where your manager is going to like draw you out and say, "Oh, talk to me about what you want to do next. How can I set you up for success?" You have to set that conversation up and say, don't get ahead of yourself. I've seen many people who are more ambitious than they are talented. But if you're doing good work, you got to capitalize that on that and say, these are the kinds of experiences I would like to have. This is what I want to do next. So could I shadow someone on this project? Maybe I could work on this project in addition to my usual workload, because you have to put yourself out there if you want to keep moving forward, if you want to not be bored at work or not be pigeonholed, because the reward for good work is more work. If you're really good
Mhm.
at Excel and you're just creating all these data analytics spreadsheets, you're going to do that for the rest of your life unless you tell somebody that there's something else you'd like to do, because that's kind of how it works. And it took me a surprisingly long time to figure that out. I really had really had to sit down and tell me, it's not enough just to
Yeah.
to be a worker bee. You really have to let people know that you're ready for more.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of bosses will appreciate hearing that, because it means they have the opportunity to stretch you, and then you'll move into the next role.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree 100% on both sides, both
Hmm.
from my own experience and being a CEO and a leader, and how you perceive those things. This is um, this is always good to know where people want to grow, but I think it's not to even build on top of it even further. It's not that different than your previous answer on how you move from tactical to strategic. You gotta design the house before you build it. And so if you just go and put some rocks over each other, and expect it to be, a great house, that's only half the work. You also need to design and then share it and say, hey, this is my plan. This
Hmm.
is what I'm trying to do, and this is what I've been doing, and this is where I want to go, and do it every time.
Yep.
So yeah, this is great. Well, Cherie, I really appreciate this. This was great, and thank you for the time and insight. If anyone wants to, geek with you on any of those topics, are you on LinkedIn, on
Yeah,
X, or?
you can find me on LinkedIn at Cherie Chelst. I'm a very unusual last name, Chelst, so I'm very easy to find. Yeah, I love talking to people about all kinds of procurement and strategic sourcing. I love helping people to develop in their career and figure out what else is out there. I love making connections for people who are hiring and people who are looking for work. So yeah, definitely, you can find me. Very accessible.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Yeah,
Um,
you're welcome. A
Thank you
pleasure
for
to
the
meet
time.
you.
You too.
Okay. Bye bye.